That's it. See the ball.
The Athletic Officials Association, or as it's commonly referred to, the AOA, was established in 1917 in Chicago, Illinois, with the purpose to train football and basketball officials. One of the founders of the AOA and the first football division president was Walter Eckersall, a sports writer with the Chicago Tribune and referee of the first Tournament of Roses game in 1916 between Washington State and Brown University.
I once wrote a letter to Referee Magazine, and I had the minutes of our first AOA meeting in 1917. And I wrote and said, can we find out if we are the first local organization? For 3 months in a row, they wrote it in the Referee Magazine, asking if any other organization, and no other organization kept. So the AOA was the first local organization in the entire country.
The AOA held their meetings at the Atlantic Hotel until 1945, when they then moved to the Bismarck Hotel.
I started in '67. We were meeting at the Bismarck Hotel downtown on Randolph. Used to drive down in my little '63 Volkswagen because I could park under the Wells Street L track. I could always find a spot to squirrel that little car in.
Well, we began with meetings down at the Bismarck Hotel in downtown Chicago. So it was always a thrill to drive to Chicago and find a place to park and go up and have these meetings.
In 1978, the AOA moved to the suburbs and have been meeting there ever since.
Remember, working with the AOA when we decided to move out of Bismarck Hotel and moved out west to try to become more accessible to officials outside of the city proper. That was always a big consideration. Moved to Oak Park and a couple of the high schools. And we gypsied around for quite a while before we ended up, I think, finally up in Bensonville at Fenton High School for quite some time.
In 1929, the AOA faced its first major challenge when some of their members broke off to form the Central Officials Association, or otherwise known as the COA.
Well, the founders of the COA were Elliot Hassan and Hap Boyle and Ed Bronson.
COA, of course, was made up way back of a bunch of AOA guys, young guys, who didn't think they were getting the right amount of games and so forth. And they went off and started the COA.
And there was always this rivalry between the AOA and the COA. But basically, the guys were all officials, and we were all friends, and we all worked together. We worked all the games together, and the fact that we were AOA or COA really had no effect at all on the officiating. It was kind of fun. Now, he's an AOA guy, he's a COA guy, but they were all the same.
But a lot of COA members were coming over to our meetings because the COA, not being in the IHSA at the time, and in the Catholic League they were using the NCAA rules, they were coming over and coming over to listen to our rules meeting. I said, we're not getting the IHSA rules and we're working public league games. And we have to learn the high school rules. So they were coming over and said, I got a big bang out of that.
I mean, their guys were just as good as our guys. And they just belonged to it's like belonging to a different church. What difference does it make? They had the same kind of meetings. They went over mechanics and rules and everything else. I mean, I worked with guys like Otho Kortz and Jack Pitkus, fellows like that were long-time AOA guys. They were great friends and great officials. So there really was no difference.
I got to know all the COA guys and everybody, and it was and at one point in time, we got together and talked about merging and becoming one organization again. But a guy by the name of Frank Strosha, a Big Ten guy, said, okay, for the first 3 years, no AOA guy can be an officer. No this, no this, no that. I said, Frank, and I had worked a lot of Catholic League games with him publicly. I said, Frank, it's been nice knowing you. He says, well, all we want is you, Brooks, and Trainer. The rest, I said, no. The three of us don't walk out on the rest of our membership. It was nice knowing you, Frank. And I walked out.
The history and the family of the AOA is tremendous.
Abe Glick, of course, was a legendary official who worked probably until almost 90 years old, and his award was a great honor for me. I knew Abe very well and worked games with him years ago. In my real youth, I was in my early 20s, which was over 60 years ago, so I was very honored by the association.
Shorty Ray's coming tonight. Shorty Ray's coming tonight. And for about 4 or 5 weeks, I heard Shorty Ray's coming tonight. And naturally, I asked some of the members, I said, who is this Shorty Ray? He says, he wrote the NFL rule book. I said, really? He said, yeah. When the NFL started, George Halas somehow knew of Shorty Ray, and he called Shorty Ray into his office. And he said, we need an NFL pro football rule book. And they're all giving me your name. And Shorty Ray said, yeah, I'll write your rule book. So Shorty Ray, AOA, sat down and wrote the first NFL rule book.
Tommy Kuzminoff.
Tom Kuzminoff was president of the football division for 17 years. And he wrote for the old Herald American.
And he was a newspaper man, and there was a lot of stories.
And he finally retired, moved to Florida. And now we had to hire and get a new president. And I won by 1 vote.
Otho Koertz.
Otho was one of the finest officials. Otho worked in the Big Ten. I believe we worked together a number of years in the Big Ten. Otho was an outstanding high school and college official, and he was also an outstanding baseball man. In fact, he could have been a Major League Baseball guy.
Well, the good thing about Otho is excellent official, of course, and he ended up somehow, he worked baseball, and he somehow ended up working a Northwestern baseball game. And who showed up to be on the bases with him but Jerry Markbright. And Markbright didn't know baseball. So Otho and set Markbright down and went over and showed him the whole two-man system.
He taught me how to work baseball. I worked a number of years in baseball because of him.
Otho, he got in with Markbright very much. And they took a liking to each other, working around, and all of a sudden we finally had an AOA guy in the Big Ten.
Otho and I went to the Pan American Games in 1967. We were the only 2 American umpires for baseball. And out of desperation, because Otho was a great cigar smoker, I began smoking cigars because I couldn't live in that hotel room for 2 weeks without something to offset the smoke. Otho was a great friend and a great official.
It's funny, I was a freshman basketball coach at St. Joe's High School, and Ken Trainer, who was a big member of the AOA, used to do my freshman basketball games. And he, after a couple of years, he said, you know, why don't you go into officiating too?
Ken Trainer was the AOA historian. He knew everything there was to know about the AOA, and he nurtured it like a child of his own, supported it in every way, up to and including financial support. the group might have gone under at one time, but he put his own money in it to keep us going. And I don't know if a lot of people ever knew about that, but you know, he was the heart and soul of the group.
He did more things from the AOA. I would say, if you asked me what single guy back then did the most for the AOA, it was Ken Trainor. The man, I mean, it was just fantastic. The way he made the arrangements at the Bismarck Hotel. He made arrangements for anything else outside the general. He was there doing it. And he was checking everybody's schedules and everything. I asked him, I said, how do you do your regular job, Ken? No.
Well, that's how I got started. He invited me to one of the AOA meetings, and then I got interested in it, and I was doing freshman and sophomore games for, 5-6 years before I was able to get varsity games, and then I've been working 52 years.
He looked after new officials, groomed the promising ones, and made sure they got assignment to games, and worked with better officials so they could learn. He was famous for his notes. He always wrote. He had a green nibbed ink pen that he used to write all his notes in. I wish now I had kept some of his notes.
Mr. Green Ink, if people don't remember that, he had an actual fountain pen with green ink, and that's how he signed everything.
But without Ken Trainor, I think there's a chance the AOA at some point in time might have folded and some guys dribbled over to the COA, and that's what would have happened, but not with Ken around.
Jack Pitkus was the man.
And of course we worked games together, worked a lot of high school games together. We were great friends. And he was an outstanding official. He's notorious for saving the day in several pro games where he knew the rules better than the guys on the field. He worked college ball, he worked high school ball, and he of course was an expert on the pro rules because he was on the sideline of the Bears for years.
Then all of a sudden I was working freshman games in the Catholic League because they didn't belong to the IHSA. And even though I wasn't 21, I could work their games. And my umpire for 16 softball was Pete Schmidt, and he was the football coach at St. George. So that's when I started working Catholic League games before I was 21. And then all of a sudden I got 21 and I started working, what's that, not the varsity, junior varsity games. I said, and then all of a sudden I was using varsity games. I showed up to Lane Tech one day, and back then they only had 3 guys on a high school football game. Of course, they weren't throwing the ball all over the place back then. I said, and I had my bag with me, and I went into the dressing room, and I knew the 3 guys, and I said, I'd like to be a 4th man. And I said, fine with us. And we walked out, get dressed. So we walked out. And the 2 coaches are there from Lane Tech and whatever other school it was. And they said, no, we only got 3 checks. And they said, oh, he's going to work no charge. Well, who is he? They said, oh, well, he's already been working in the Catholic League. Oh, yeah, because he doesn't have to be 21 over there. And they said, oh, well, if you can work in the Catholic League and you work on that. So I worked a 4-man game, possibly the first 4-man game in the public league at Lane Tech. And after that game, the next year, these 2 coaches talked the public league into going to 4-man. They said that 4th guy really helped. There were a lot of things that were missed, personal fouls and stuff. And the few times we did pass, we actually had a guy right there. And we should go to 4 men, and the public league went to 4 men, and then the other leagues started going to 4 men. So I always thought that was rather interesting. I always felt like I was the one who sort of started the 4-man high school games.
Ron Rothstein, Frank Muscardini, Ken Faulkner.
A gentleman by the name of Justin Fortuna, who's passed away since, and said, you know, you really belong in an association. So I joined the AOA on his recommendation. He was already part of the AOA, and met some really great people. Ray Brooks, Frankie Moscardini. They brought us along, meeting us, Ronnie Elysiak, Tommy Kleinschmidt, guys like that, and that's how I started with the AOA. And when I got into the NBA in '74, the AOA made me an honorary member. So I've been an honorary member ever since.
Wayne Endicott and I started. He was going to the same church as my wife when she was a youngster in the Austin district of Chicago. And I met him there. And I went out one Sunday to watch what he was doing. And it was just a terrible, runny, muddy day for a little bitty kiddies game. And not only that, but a woman chased him off the field trying to hit him with an umbrella. And I thought, I want to do this? Why would I want to do this? And so that's how I got started. And Ed and I worked a lot of games together.
Joe and I worked together at Bell Laboratories in Homedale, New Jersey.
Okay.
And then we transferred from Homedale, New Jersey here to Naperville. He knew Wayne Endicott from the church that his wife went to, and Wayne was officiating junior football. So we went and watched Wayne work a couple of those games and said, you know, that looks like fun. Let's try it. And that started the crew, the three of us.
And we added Bob Foster. And we worked hundreds of games together, over 700 of them actually.
And then in 1988, we were the first 5-man crew to work a state final game. We worked the 1A game in 1988, and that was the first time that the state ever used five officials on the field.
Going back to when I started with Justin Fortuna, Ray Brooks.
Ray Brooks, another great official. When you walked on the floor at Ray Brooks, everybody's got the attention. He just commanded the coaches. He was a very, very nice gentleman. Knew how to apply the rules.
Well, a funny story about Ray Brooks. You know, when he was doing major high school basketball, he worked the state tournament on a Saturday night, and then next morning I saw him at a grade school basketball game, working a grade school basketball game. And it seemed kind of funny. The night before he worked, I think, the championship game in a high school, and then the next morning he's doing a grade school game.
Ray Brooks, a fantastic basketball official. He worked downstate when the high school finals were in Champaign, and I don't know how many years he worked down there, and a couple of times he had the championship game. So when the Central States Leagues came in, and Ray Brooks was my deep man, and with his basketball officiating, that was perfect for him. What that was pass interference. And Ray Brooks was fantastic on coming up with the pass interference calls. We had no complaints. If he threw his flag, it was there. And if he didn't throw his flag, they could boo all night. It wasn't there.
Well, Ken Trainer was our president. Vince Boyle was another gentleman that was part of of helping guys move along. Frank Moscardini has always been the assignment person. The meetings were very informative. Ray Brooks was our interpreter. We never walked out of there without a question being answered, or you never walked out of there without thinking that you didn't get the right answer. You always got the right answer.
There are issues with teaching in that environment that people don't realize. First of all, you teach to the same students every year. This is not like any other school where people come, you teach them, they graduate and they leave, you don't see them again. These are the same people over and over. Not only that, the material is the same material. It's the same rule book with very few changes for the previous years. And so the challenge of try to make it fresh, try to make it interesting, try to get to somebody who's heard you before was a real challenge.
Joe Hall asked at the meetings when I was the rules interpreter, he asked the most intelligent questions of anybody at the meetings. And I knew he was the one who should move in as the new AOA rules interpreter. And that's how he did that. And then he did become a rules interpreter for the IHSA, which of course made me very proud.
AOA was, of course, one of the initiators and early supporters of the IACO, Ken Trainer and Ray Brooks and Jack Pitkus and a number of other people they were the ones that put it all together with the goal of trying to, standardize officiating, because we had some different things that we used to do that the COA used to do and that other people used to do, and it looked funny and it wasn't good for the game. We weren't doing things in a standard way, and you go to a game one week and they'd say, well, they didn't do that last week, and so that was the goal of the IACO, was to get people together and get them all on one page and standardize the way we did things. And AOA was, one of the founders of that.
The AOA is actually a teaching type of an association, teaching the young kids, like I was a long time ago, starting out and having them progress into eventually, hopefully, varsity basketball games.
Going to the meetings is so important because there are a lot of questions that go in your mind that you're afraid to answer or afraid to ask, and because you don't want to know the answer because you may not like that answer, but by the same token, you're going to get the right answer, and that's what the AOA, as far as I'm concerned, has done for all the officials in all the sports: baseball, basketball, softball, football. You're always going to get the right answer, and trust me, all of the people that moved up in the ranks at the executive level, helping all the guys, just a tremendous advantage for an individual official to move on or move up.
Through the AOA, you meet a lot of people, and one thing I remember when I was a freshman coach, and I was officiating at the same time, I'd have upcoming referees come in the gym and work my games, and at halftime or after the games. And this is when I was eventually doing varsity, and I'd have to sit down. I'd sit down with them. I'd say, hey, maybe on this particular pay, well, what would you have done? And I try to help them out that way.
Bill Matheson was one of the ones too that started to turn the thing from reading from the rule book into talking about a specific part of the game at a meeting and going through it and talking about the philosophy of why that was done that way and that. He was one of the ones that turned it away from that. He was integral in doing that. His meeting presentations were excellent. He was prepared to the nth degree.
We're all together. My job right now is to do what they did for me, and I want to be a mentor to them. And that's what the AOA did to me. They were my mentor. They helped me. I worked public league, which that wasn't supposed to happen. And I followed a Justin, or I followed Faulkner, or I followed Trainer. These are a lot of tough names, and it's my turn now for all the young guys that are in our meeting tonight. It's my job to do that.
It's my 39th year officiating and my 39th year as an AOA member. I've always been with AOA, and they've always taught me. I've learned the mechanics of the game and the rules and stuff, and it's just been a real great experience for me.
It's where I got my start, and I learned a lot when I was young, and a lot of good mentors, and it really helped me with the book rules and on the court stuff as we moved on from my younger years.
The AOA has been very instrumental in my career in officiating. I belong to several sports within AOA, softball, basketball, and football. Been in the basketball division the longest, about 25 years, and it's been very instrumental to me from the standpoint of training, education, networking, meeting new people, getting mentors to help me, being able to network with new assigners and new officials, and it's just a tremendous help in regards to advancing my career and getting me on the right path. And our weekly association meetings before the seasons in all three sports, for the most part, are essential to get prepared for the upcoming season.
It's meant everything to me. Every clinic, every association meeting, they mentored me through my early years up through going to a state final. So I owe everything I've done in officiating to the AOA.
AOA has given me the opportunity to meet a lot of other officials, get to know them. It's given me the opportunity to become a better official myself from the standpoint of the rules meetings we have, the education that we have, and just being able to talk about situations that come up and learn from each other.
I think the biggest memory I have of the AOA is probably the caliber of officials, officials that have a storied past, not only in basketball, but in the Chicagoland basketball area, and at the national level. It's amazing to find out the depth of the caliber of the officials and the skill level.
AOA is a great group of people. They're here to help everybody. They want to help you, and in doing so, you know, they introduce you to everybody they know. And if you're a good person, they'll, you know, do the best they can to get you to where you want to be. If you want to be a college official, they'll get you there.
It's meant a lot to me. Not only have I been able to grow as an official and get better, but also a lot of my best friends have been made as part of the AOA. It's a great place to be.
The AOA has meant a lot to my officiating career. When I moved to Chicago in 1999, I joined the AOA in 2000 and went to a camp with Octavio Herrera and Frank Marscadini, a basketball camp, and joined on the spot. So it's really meant well, and ever since I progressed in my career, working in my state finals and things like that, I've enjoyed the camaraderie, obviously, most of all, but the training, and I was a former basketball division president as well, so it's meant a lot to my career, both on and off the field and court.
Across the country, there are all local official organizations. And in the Chicago area, there's us, the AOA, the oldest association in the entire country, come to the AOA meetings and sit down, and we have several good men from year to year to year who've gotten up with the blackboard, and they will draw all kinds of diagrams and everything. And when this play happens, this is this and this, and they'll go over from Rule 1 all the way through the rule book. And they will go through every rule.
I congratulate them on 100 years being in existence. You can imagine how much good an association like that does for young officials who work their way up and work every level of the game. So it's really, without those associations, officiating would be in a really sad state right now.
It's just a great group of guys, and they want to help high school kids in their playing their games, basketball, football, baseball, softball, and that's what we do. And if you're that type of guy, and you'll attend meetings one night every week and listen to the rules interpreter so you know what you're doing when you're officiating these games, then you'll really enjoy it. If you're that type of person. And you don't mind every once in a while everybody screaming at you. The AOA just became one big happy family.